Normally, if you're a black teacher, you're told not to bother. But what happens when the most ruthless middle school bullies, the kind who've made grown teachers cry and quit, finally meet someone who looks at their worst behavior and says, "I see you, I know your pain, and I'm not going anywhere. If I'm black, so be it." If you love interesting stories like this that expose the truth, please give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments section where in the world you are watching this video. And also do well to smash that subscribe button. They said she wouldn't last a single day. The new black teacher with the steady voice and piercing gaze. Just another substitute for them to destroy. But in less than 60 seconds, the bullies who ruled Lincoln Middle School were brought to their knees. Not through punishment, but through something far more powerful. What unfolded in classroom 314 transformed everything, and nobody saw it coming. Don't look away now, because what happens next will leave you speechless and forever change how you view true strength and the power of forgiveness. Lincoln Middle School in Springfield was the kind of place where whispers traveled faster than fire alarms. So when news spread that a new substitute teacher was taking over the most notorious class in the building, room 314, students gathered like vultures sensing fresh prey. "She's young," whispered one 7th grader, eyes wide with anticipation. "I heard she's super strict," added another, barely containing excitement. "Nah, word is she's completely clueless. Probably won't survive first period," came the sneering response from Tyler, a 8th grader who'd crowned himself the undisputed king of classroom chaos. Room 314 had earned its deadly reputation the hard way. It devoured new teachers whole and left their broken spirits scattered across the linoleum floor before lunch break. Tyler and his ruthless crew, Ashley, Connor, and DeShawn, were the masterminds behind this reign of terror. They didn't use their fists to break people down. No, their weapons were far more sinister. Public humiliation, mocking applause, fake tears, and their infamous teacher breakdown bingo game they played whenever fresh blood walked through their door. The classroom practically vibrated with malicious energy as the morning bell echoed through the halls. Cell phones disappeared into pockets like hidden daggers. Pranks were loaded and ready like ammunition in a war zone. Every single student sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for their latest victim to stumble into their trap. Then it happened. Sharp heels clicked down the hallway with a rhythm that spoke of confidence and purpose. Each step rang out like a declaration of war. The door swung open, and in walked Ms. Freeman. She wasn't what anyone had expected. Tall and commanding, she wore a crisp charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse. Her natural curls formed a magnificent halo around her face, and her dark eyes swept across the room with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't hesitant. She looked like she owned the place. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice smooth as velvet but strong as steel. "I'm Ms. Freeman. Let's begin." No awkward introductions. No nervous fidgeting with papers. No stuttering attempts to win them over. She simply glided to the whiteboard and began writing with fluid, confident strokes. The entire class blinked in confusion. Their carefully rehearsed chaos suddenly disrupted. Tyler leaned toward Ashley and hissed under his breath, "Let's see how long that confidence lasts when we're done with her." But the moment Ms. Freeman finished writing and turned to face them, the entire atmosphere shifted like a sudden storm rolling in. In bold, elegant letters across the board were the words, "The loudest person in the room is usually hiding the deepest pain." The whispers died instantly. Hearts began beating faster. Tyler's smirk faltered just slightly. Ms. Freeman's voice was gentle, but carried an edge that made everyone unconsciously sit up straighter. "I don't mind noise," she said, scanning each face with those penetrating eyes. "But never confuse noise with real power." Then she smiled, calm, knowing, completely unbothered. In that electric moment, The hunters realized they might have just picked the wrong prey. The game was about to begin, but Ms. Freeman clearly wasn't planning to play by their rules. By the time second period arrived, Room 314 had transformed into a military operations center. Tyler slouched back in his chair with arms crossed, and that trademark arrogant grin plastered across his face. "She thinks she's different from all the rest," he whispered to his crew. "They always do at first." Ashley, ever the Academy Award-worthy actress, responded with theatrical flair. "Give her exactly 5 minutes before the complete meltdown begins." Connor and DeShawn exchanged their fake name cards with practiced ease. A simple but effective trick designed to create maximum confusion and chaos. The plan was beautifully simple. Total disruption leading to absolute destruction. Ms. Freeman moved through the classroom with graceful efficiency, passing out handouts while completely ignoring the whispered giggles and the obvious buzzing of hidden cell phones under desks. Tyler raised his hand with exaggerated seriousness, ready to launch his first attack. "Yes, Marcus," Ms. Freeman said without even glancing up, using the fake name he'd carefully written on his desk placard. Tyler froze like a deer caught in headlights. She hadn't even looked at the seating chart. How could she possibly know his fake identity already? Scrambling to recover his composure, he stammered. Yeah. I don't understand this question at all. It's way too advanced for someone like me. Are you sure this is even meant for our grade level?" Ms. Freeman walked over to his desk, her heels clicking with a rhythm that matched her completely unshaken confidence. "Well, Marcus," she said with a slight smile, "that entirely depends on whether you're ready to challenge yourself, or if you prefer staying comfortable in your confusion." The class erupted in muffled snickers. Tyler's smugness cracked like thin ice. Not missing a beat, Ashley launched into her Oscar-worthy performance. She sniffled loudly, dropped her pencil with dramatic flair, and whispered just loud enough for the entire room to hear. "She's being so incredibly mean to all of us." Ms. Freeman slowly turned to face her, eyebrows raised with amusement. "I'm sorry, Ashley. Are you upset because I didn't fall for your little setup?" Ashley's jaw dropped so fast it nearly hit the floor. That's when Connor decided to escalate things. He let out a high-pitched squeal and pretended to sneeze all over his worksheet. Paper balls began flying through the air like missiles. DeShawn started tapping his pencil against his desk like a broken metronome, creating the perfect soundtrack to chaos. It was classic room 314 pandemonium, the kind that had broken 5 substitute teachers in the past month alone. But Ms. Freeman didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice a single decibel. Instead, she calmly returned to the whiteboard, picked up a paper airplane that had landed near her feet, and slowly unfolded it while the entire room watched in stunned silence. The cruel, racist joke written inside was meant to destroy her spirit and send her running to the principal's office in tears. Tyler and his crew leaned forward, practically salivating as they waited for the fury, the tears, the inevitable breakdown that would mark another victory. But Ms. Freeman simply folded the paper neatly, set it down on her desk, and turned back to face the class with those steady, unblinking eyes. "Class," she said, her voice low and commanding like distant thunder. "Let's have a real conversation about what true power actually looks like." Every single student sat frozen in their seats, because in that heart-stopping moment, they realized this wasn't a game anymore. This was a reckoning. The silence that followed Ms. Freeman's words felt like the calm before a devastating storm. Nobody moved. Even DeShawn, who once laughed during a fire drill evacuation, sat rigid as a statue in his chair. Tyler glanced sideways, suddenly uncertain about his position in this deadly chess match. Ms. Freeman wasn't reacting the way any teacher ever had before. She didn't scream, didn't threaten detention, didn't reach for the phone to call the principal. She simply walked back to the whiteboard and underlined the sentence she had written earlier. The loudest person in the room is usually hiding the deepest pain. Then she turned to face them, crossing her arms with gentle authority. "You all enjoy playing games?" she asked, her voice steady as a rock, her eyes locked onto the ringleaders like a laser. "Let's play one together." Tyler's smirk returned, though it felt forced this time. He was desperately trying to regain control of his kingdom. "Sure. What kind of game? Guess how long it takes before you start crying." The class snickered nervously, but the laughter felt hollow and uncertain. Ms. Freeman took a deep breath, her tone remaining perfectly calm. "No. Let's call this one truth or truth. I'll say something real about you, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong." Connor raised his hand hesitantly, like a child afraid of the answer. "What do we win if we're right?" She smiled with the wisdom of someone who'd seen it all before. "Dignity, self-respect, maybe even a chance at a better life. Does that sound valuable enough to you?" The classroom murmured with uncomfortable energy. Some students rolled their eyes, but curiosity had begun to replace their mockery like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Ms. Freeman turned directly to Tyler, and her gaze felt like an X-ray machine seeing straight through to his soul. "You make jokes about everything and disrupt every single class," she said softly. "But you're absolutely terrified that nobody would listen to you if you ever tried to be serious. You started acting like the class clown back in 6th grade, right after your father walked out on your family and never came back." Tyler's face drained of all color. His trademark smirk vanished so quickly it might have fallen off his face and shattered on the floor. How do you know that?" he whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. Ms. Freeman didn't answer. She simply moved on to her next target. "Ashley," she said, her tone gentle but penetrating. "You pretend to cry and throw tantrums so nobody ever sees how often you cry real tears when you're alone. You make constant jokes about love and relationships, but deep in your heart, you don't believe you're worthy of being loved because your mother abandoned you when you were 9 years old, and nobody ever bothered to explain why." Ashley's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Her usual theatrical confidence had completely evaporated. The classroom had become a tomb of absolute silence. All that rebellious energy, all that destructive power, gone in an instant. What replaced it was something electric, uncomfortable, raw, and devastatingly real. Ms. Freeman looked around the room at each stunned face. "I'm not a mind reader or a magician," she said clearly. "I've just been exactly where you are right now. I sat in those same seats, played those same destructive games, wore those same protective masks to hide my pain." She walked back to her desk, placed both hands on its surface, and spoke with crystal clarity. "But you know what changed everything for me? I took off my mask and came back here to help you do the same." For the first time in the history of room 314, the class didn't know what to say. But for the first time in their lives, they were finally, truly listening. By the next morning, room 314 had been transformed into something completely unrecognizable. Gone were the flying paper airplanes, the fake names, and the sarcastic echoes of disruption. Instead, there hung a strange, almost sacred quiet. The kind that settles over people when they're no longer sure if they're in control or completely outmatched. Tyler slouched in his chair with arms folded defensively, but his eyes followed Ms. Freeman's every movement like a hawk tracking its prey. She entered the classroom carrying a small black wooden box, which she placed ceremoniously on her desk. "Today," she announced, "I want each of you to write down a truth. Something real, something genuine, something that nobody else in this room knows about you." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Don't sign your name. Don't speak. Just write from your heart." A wave of visible discomfort rippled through the classroom like a stone thrown into still water. DeShawn looked at Connor, who could only shrug helplessly. Ashley hesitated, twirling her pen between nervous fingers like a baton. Even the usual background hum of whispers had completely disappeared. One by one, students began to write. Some rolled their eyes in defiance. Others stared at their blank papers like they were staring into an abyss. But slowly, inevitably, the anonymous notes began making their way into the mysterious black box. Ms. Freeman stirred the folded slips with gentle reverence and pulled out the first confession. She didn't search for names. There were none to find. Just secrets. Quiet ones. Painful ones. Real ones. "I haven't seen my older brother in 3 years," she read aloud. "He got arrested and sent to prison. I smile constantly so people don't realize I hate going home to an empty house." She pulled out another slip. "Sometimes I act mean and angry because I don't want people to notice how scared I am of everything." And another. "My dad drinks too much and yells at my mom. I turn up my music so I can't hear them fighting, but I still hear everything." One after another, she read their hidden truths. Never reacting with pity. Never judging their pain. Just holding space for their vulnerability, like a sacred trust. Then she paused. Her fingers gripped the edges of one particular note a moment longer before reading it aloud. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. "I sent that racist joke yesterday. I thought it was funny at the time, but now I don't even know who I am anymore." The entire classroom went completely still. You could have heard a pin drop in the hallway 3 doors away. Ms. Freeman carefully folded the note back up, looked out at the sea of frozen faces, and said with quiet dignity, "That right there, that's growth. That's real courage. Whoever you are, thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." Tyler sank lower in his seat, his lips pressed tightly together. Nobody looked directly at him, but he felt their awareness anyway, like heat from a fire. For the first time in their lives, the class wasn't laughing at someone else's pain. They were seeing themselves reflected in that pain. And somehow, that scared them more than any teacher ever had. Ms. Freeman stepped out from behind her desk, her voice filled with gentle authority. "You all want to be treated like adults? Being an adult means being real, even when it hurts more than you can imagine." Then she added words that would echo in their minds for years to come. "Healing can only begin when hiding finally stops." And just like that, the walls of room 314 cracked wide open. By the 5th day, something profound and unspoken had shifted within the walls of room 314. The atmosphere that once buzzed with eye rolls, side glances, and whispered insults now hummed with something entirely unfamiliar: genuine respect. Not the kind forced through fear of punishment, but the kind that grows slowly and naturally, like flowers pushing through concrete. Ms. Freeman entered the classroom, carrying a single photograph in a simple silver frame. She placed it carefully on the edge of her desk, angled just enough for the front row to see clearly. The image showed a younger version of herself, maybe 16 years old, with tired eyes and her hair pulled back tightly. Beside her stood an older black woman wearing a faded work uniform and cracked glasses, her hands rough from years of hard labor. "This," Ms. Freeman said, gently touching the frame, "was my mother. Her name was Dorothy Freeman. She worked as a night janitor at 3 different schools in our neighborhood, cleaning up after people who pretended they couldn't see her." The class leaned forward, completely captivated. Even Tyler had stopped his usual fidgeting and was listening intently. Ms. Freeman began pacing slowly, her voice carrying the weight of memory. "My mama told me something once that I'll never forget. She said, 'Baby girl, people won't always clap for you when you succeed. Sometimes they'll spit in your direction just for trying. But you keep standing tall anyway. You keep being proud of who you are anyway.'" Tyler stared at the photograph, his jaw clenched tight. Something about that woman's weathered face felt hauntingly familiar. Like someone he'd seen countless times cleaning up his own messes at home while he played video games and pretended she was invisible. Ms. Freeman turned to the whiteboard and wrote in bold letters, "How you treat invisible people reveals who you really are inside." She then passed out fresh sheets of paper to each student. "I want you to write a letter," she instructed. "Not to me, not to your friends, but to someone you've hurt or ignored. Someone who deserved so much better from you than what they received." The room fell into contemplative silence. Then slowly, pens began scratching against paper like whispered confessions. Ashley stared at her blank sheet for a long moment, then finally began writing with tears forming in her eyes. "Dear Grandma Rose, I'm so sorry for screaming at you when you forgot my birthday last month. I know your memory isn't what it used to be, and I pretended I didn't care when you cried. But I do care. I care so much it hurts." DeShawn wrote quietly, his head bowed in concentration. "To the kid I used to trip in the hallway every Tuesday. I don't know why I did that to you. I think I just didn't want anyone looking too closely at me. So I made sure they were looking at you instead. That was wrong." Even Tyler, who hadn't picked up a pencil voluntarily in weeks, found himself scribbling something on his page. He folded it quickly and shoved it deep into his notebook like it contained nuclear secrets. When they finished writing, Ms. Freeman spoke with quiet wisdom. "Some of the most powerful words you'll ever speak, no one else will ever hear. But you will. And sometimes that's enough to change everything." For the first time in their educational careers, these students didn't feel like jokes or problems to be solved. They felt genuinely seen, and somehow, that was more terrifying than any detention had ever been. Friday arrived like a thunderclap, shaking the very foundations of Lincoln Middle School. The hallways buzzed with electric tension about a fight that had nearly erupted in the cafeteria. 2 eighth graders chest to chest, teachers shouting, chaos barely contained. But in room 314, a different kind of storm was brewing, and it was centered entirely around Tyler. He walked in 20 minutes late, hoodie pulled up over his head, shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the world. Ms. Freeman didn't say a word about his tardiness. She simply glanced at the clock, nodded toward his empty desk, and continued her sentence as if nothing had happened. "Real power never comes from controlling others," she was saying. "It comes from understanding yourself and others deeply enough to choose compassion over cruelty." Tyler slammed his backpack down with unnecessary force, the sound echoing through the quiet classroom like a gunshot. Ashley and DeShawn flinched visibly. It was like watching someone try to explode without actually having a fuse to light. Ms. Freeman didn't react with anger or surprise. Instead, she asked with gentle curiosity, "Tyler, do you have something you'd like to share with all of us?" He laughed, but the sound was bitter and broken. "What? You gonna make me write another pathetic letter to someone I've hurt?" The classroom held its collective breath. "No," Ms. Freeman replied, her voice steady as bedrock. "But I am going to ask what's really happening with you right now. Because this anger, this pain you're carrying, it's not actually about me at all." Tyler shot to his feet, so quickly his chair toppled backward with a crash. "You think you know me?" he shouted, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "You think a few fancy speeches about truth and a couple of shared secrets make you some kind of miracle worker?" He whirled around to face his classmates, heat rising in his voice like steam from boiling water. "Y'all think she's some kind of saint, don't you? She doesn't know us. She doesn't know what we deal with when we walk out that door. She doesn't know what it's like to go home to." His voice broke completely. The entire class sat frozen. Even the wall clock seemed to stop ticking. Miss Freeman didn't raise her voice or move to comfort him. Instead, she walked to the whiteboard and wrote in clean, deliberate strokes, "Hurt people hurt people." Then she turned back to Tyler, her eyes filled with understanding rather than judgment. "You're absolutely right, Tyler," she said softly. "I don't know every single detail of your life, But I recognize what pain looks like in the eyes of someone who's been carrying it alone for far too long. Tyler's fists clenched at his sides. For just a moment, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "My mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "She cleans office buildings downtown. Gets home at midnight every night, smelling like industrial bleach and disinfectant. She's so tired she can barely stand up, but she still asks if I've eaten dinner." The room held its breath like a prayer. "I act like I don't care about anything," he continued, his shoulders beginning to tremble. "But I do care. I care so much it feels like it's killing me. I don't know how to say sorry to her. I don't know how to say sorry to anybody." That was the moment everything changed. The wall Tyler had built around his heart finally cracked wide open. Ms. Freeman approached him slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Then start right here," she whispered. "You just did." Tyler looked down, his whole body shaking with the weight of years of hidden pain. Ashley quietly reached into her backpack and handed him a tissue. No teasing, no smirks, no cruel laughter. Just one human being offering comfort to another. In that sacred moment, room 314 wasn't a classroom anymore. It was a mirror, reflecting the truth about who they really were underneath all their armor. And for the first time in his life, Tyler could finally see his own reflection clearly. Monday morning brought a completely different energy to room 314. The air still felt warm and charged, but now it carried something sacred. The kind of reverence you feel in places where important things happen. Ms. Freeman entered without her usual folder or coffee mug. Instead, she carried a simple wooden stool and a small index card with one word written in elegant script: courage. She placed the stool in the very center of the room, like it was a throne, then held up the card for everyone to see. "This," she announced with quiet dignity, "is the courage chair. Anyone who feels ready to own their mistakes, apologize for their actions, or offer forgiveness to someone else can sit here. No judgment from anyone. No mockery. Just truth spoken with bravery." The classroom fell into contemplative silence. Students looked at the wooden stool like it might transform them or reveal their deepest secrets. Then DeShawn stood up. He walked slowly to the center of the room, every step feeling monumental. He sat down stiffly on the stool, cleared his throat, and looked directly at Ashley. "Ashley," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I used to call you a tryhard whenever you raised your hand to answer questions. I laughed when other people made fun of how much you cared about school. I thought it made me look cool, but really it just made me a coward. I'm genuinely sorry." Ashley blinked back tears, then nodded with grace beyond her years. "Thank you, DeShawn. I forgive you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud or theatrical. But the entire room shifted like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of the earth. One by one, more students found their courage. Ashley took the chair next. "Connor," she said, looking directly at him, "I made cruel jokes about you in 7th grade for wearing the same hoodie every single day. I didn't know your family was struggling financially. I didn't know you were going through such a hard time at home. I'm sorry for being so thoughtless and mean." Connor's eyes filled with tears, but he managed a small smile. "It's okay, Ashley. Thank you for saying that." Even Ms. Freeman took her turn on the courage chair. "To every single one of you," she said, her voice carrying years of wisdom. "I judged too quickly when I first heard about this class. I assumed you were just another group of kids trying to break down a substitute teacher for entertainment. But you weren't trying to break me. You were testing whether I would break with you, whether I would give up on you like so many others have. Thank you for holding me accountable and teaching me to see beyond my assumptions." Tyler remained seated throughout all of this, arms crossed defensively. But his eyes tracked every single word like they were precious gems he was collecting. Then, as if the silence itself had dared him to move, Tyler slowly stood up. The walk to the courage chair felt like the longest journey of his life. His heart pounded louder than any school bell ever had. He sat down heavily and looked first at Ms. Freeman, then at his classmates. "I sent that racist joke," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That cruel meme about Ms. Freeman. It was me." No gasps, no shocked exclamations, just breathless, respectful waiting. Tyler's voice cracked like fragile glass. "I did it because I thought if I made people laugh at someone else first, nobody would ever think to laugh at me. I thought if I could make someone else the target, I'd be safe." He looked directly at Ms. Freeman, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. I see that now. I see you now." Ms. Freeman stepped forward and knelt beside the courage chair, meeting Tyler at eye level. "Thank you for telling the truth, Tyler. That took incredible bravery." Then something miraculous happened. The class, those same students who had once mocked, snickered, and torn each other down with vicious cruelty, stood up and began to applaud, not out of pity or obligation, but out of genuine respect for the courage it took to be that honest. The courage chair had accomplished its sacred purpose. But Ms. Freeman had one final lesson to share, and she was saving it for last. Friday afternoon, the last period of what would become a legendary week in the history of Lincoln Middle School. Room 314 was silent, but not with the oppressive quiet of boredom or fear. This was the reverent silence of a cathedral, a place where something holy had taken place. The desks had been pushed aside to form a perfect circle with chairs. At the center sat Ms. Freeman, holding a single cream-colored envelope in her hands like it contained the secrets of the universe. She smiled, but this wasn't her usual teacher smile. This was something deeper. Pride mixed with peace, hope wrapped in love. "I want to leave you all with something," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had traveled a long, difficult road to reach this moment. "It's not a test score or a grade for your report cards. It's a truth I once desperately needed to hear." She carefully unfolded the letter and began to read aloud, her voice clear and strong. Asterisk, to the student who laughs too loudly to hide their pain. To the bully who's really just afraid of being forgotten. To the quiet kid who dreams enormous dreams but speaks in whispers. To the one who feels invisible and believes they don't matter. You are not your worst moment. You are not the cruel labels others gave you out of ignorance or fear. You are not the mistakes you made when you didn't know better. You are becoming something beautiful. You are growing into someone extraordinary. And no one, absolutely no one, gets to define your worth except you. Your past does not determine your future. Your pain does not have to become someone else's prison. Your story is still being written, and the best chapters haven't been written yet. You matter. You belong. You are loved, even when you can't feel it, especially when you can't believe it. You are enough, exactly as you are, right now, in this moment. And tomorrow, you'll be even more. Asterisk. Several students wiped their eyes openly. Even Tyler sat staring at the floor, blinking faster than usual, his tough exterior finally cracking to reveal the vulnerable child underneath. Ms. Freeman looked up from the letter with eyes that sparkled with moisture. That letter was written to me 15 years ago by a teacher who refused to give up on me when I had completely given up on myself. And now, I'm writing it to each of you. She pulled out a stack of small, sealed envelopes, each one bearing a student's name written in her elegant handwriting. One by one, she handed them out like sacred gifts. Nobody opened them immediately. They held their envelopes like treasures, like promises, like keys to doors they hadn't even known existed. Then Ashley stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "Ms. Freeman, where are you going after this?" Ms. Freeman's smile was bittersweet. "This was a temporary position, sweetheart. I was only here to substitute until the permanent teacher returned from medical leave. Gasps and protests rippled through the circle like waves. But you can't leave us, DeShawn blurted out, panic in his voice. You changed everything. You changed us. She stepped closer, her hands gentle as she spoke. I didn't change you. I just reminded you of who you already were underneath all that pain and fear. The courage, the kindness, the strength, that was always inside you. I just helped you remember how to find it. Tyler stood up slowly. Gone was the swagger, the defensive posturing, the cruel mask he'd worn for so long. He walked up to her with steady steps and said, his voice clear and strong, "Thank you for seeing me before I learned how to see myself." Ms. Freeman wrapped him in a gentle hug, then opened her arms to embrace the others who gathered around her. As she turned to leave, Ashley called out desperately, "Wait! What happens if the next teacher isn't like you? What if they don't understand us the way you do?" Ms. Freeman paused at the doorway and turned back one final time, her silhouette framed by the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "Then you be the difference," she said simply. "You be the kindness you wish to see. You be the understanding you're hoping for. You be the change this world desperately needs." With that, she walked out of room 314 for the last time, leaving behind something that hadn't existed when she'd first arrived. A classroom no longer divided by fear, anger, and cruelty, but united by truth, courage, and hope. The bullies, the quiet ones, the lost ones, the angry ones, they had been transformed into something entirely new. They had become a family bound together by the understanding that everyone carries hidden pain, and everyone deserves a second chance to become who they're meant to be. And it all started with one teacher who dared to believe that beneath every cruel action lies a wounded heart waiting to be healed.